Hey guys, what's going on? It's Adam Science Tutor, and today we're going to be talking about the cranial nerves. So cranial, broken down as brain, nerves, so these are the nerves in our brain that allow our facial motions, our expressions, and everything else. So there's 1 through 12, and we're going to go through each of these today, and they all stem from the brainstem. So they're all coming from the brainstem, which makes sense because they're cranial nerves. And they're mostly sensory, but we're going to have a few that are motor, but we'll get to those in just a bit. So we're going to start with cranial nerve 1. And cranial nerve 1, I have a little saying. I kind of made a mistake when writing this out, but you smell first before you eat. So cranial nerve 1, because we're smelling first before you eat. And that's going to be your olfactory nerve. So olfactory is for nose. So that'll be our sensory sensory nerve from the nose, which makes sense because we smell first before we eat. So think of it as you're in a kitchen, you smell it first before you eat it. So now cranial nerve 2. So cranial nerve 2, I used the Roman numeric and drew it out laterally. And you know what I'm going to draw? I'm going to draw a pretty little eye. I'm going to draw pretty high. So I'm going to draw this eye out. The eye is going to be a signal to me that it's going to be having to do something with the eye. Is going to be the optic nerve. So the optic nerve, and this is going to be our sensory nerve from the eye. So sensory from the eye. And then this raises the question, so what's going to be the motor from the eye? So that's going to help us figure out cranial nerve 3. So how does it move? What is the motor nerve to the eye? Well, cranial nerve 3 might be the answer. So cranial nerve 3, and it's going to be the oculomotor nerve. So oculo for like the eye, and motor because that is our motor unit. That's our answer. So how does the eye move? What's the motor nerve to the eye? The oculomotor nerve, cranial nerve 3. So you have motor to the eye. Cool. So cranial nerve 2, we asked a question. Cranial nerve 3 is the answer. Cranial nerve 4, that's a tough one. It's trochlear nerve. I couldn't figure out a way to get something to stick in my brain, so it's just straight memorization. So trochlear nerve is what it is, and that's going to be our superior oblique muscles. Yeah, cranial nerve 4 kind of sucks, so that's kind of hard to remember. But trochlear nerve, and it's motor to the superior oblique muscles. Cool. So cranial nerve 5, I like this one much better, and it's going to be the way I memorized it was I broke the Roman numeral up. We have the top half, the middle half, and the third half. So 1, 2, and 3. That's going to be the start of the name for trigeminal nerve. Tri means 3, so we're going to have 3 trunks from the trigeminal nerve, and these trunks are going to be off of the trigeminal nerve. Trunk 1 will be called, hold on, move my face. Okay, yeah, and that's an important note too. So the trunk 1 and 2 will be sensory, and then trunk 3 will be sensory and motor. So trunk 1 will be ophthalmic nerve, or ophthalmic trunk, and the way I like to think of it is it's ophthalmologist, so it's going to have something to do with the eye, and we're going to have to get through that later. But all 3 of these are going to have additional branches off of them, so it's like a big branch chain, all coming off the trigeminal nerve. The second trunk will be the maxillary, and the third trunk, which has both sensory and motor, will be mandibular. So trigeminal nerve has those 3 branches, and those 3 branches will have additional branches. Cranial nerve 6. So what I do for this one, you got to remember the name. It's abducens nerve, but when drawing it out will help me remember what it does. You draw out 6, and then like in gross anatomy, you draw the colon and the rectum, and that gives us kind of the function of what the abducens nerve does. It's the motor nerve to the rectus. So very cool, pretty easy there. So you draw the 6, and that gives you a little display of where and anatomically would it help go or do. So motor to rectus. Cranial nerve 7. Cranial 7, you have to memorize the nerve, but I do this and I count up each letter, and it helps me remember what it is. So F, there's 1, A, 2, 3, C, so on. So facial, I know you guys know how to spell. So facial nerve, there's 7 letters in facial nerve, so that lets me know that facial nerve is cranial nerve 7. And facial nerve is pretty cool. So facial nerve allows us to have all the expressions of the motor to all the expression muscles of our face. So it's the motor to the muscles or the expression muscles of the face. And the expression muscles of the face I'll be covering in another video, but there's a mnemonic to remember it. It's a tiny zebra bit my cake or bit my car. So that is what it is, and I'm gonna write out the mnemonic. But once again, we're gonna go over those muscles in an additional video, not in this one. So a tiny zebra bit my car, or cake, or whatever you want it to bite, but something with a C, because that is another muscle. So cool. So now we're gonna have cranial nerve 8. Cranial nerve 8. And this one I use the number 8 as well to help me figure out what it does and where it's at. So, and I'm gonna draw 8 in a lateral way, almost like the eternity sign. I don't say eternity sign because it's like an 8, because you're a cranial nerve 8, and we're trying to draw it laterally. So 8. And then I draw a face. So draw the eyes, nose, and smile. Happy little dude. And these are gonna be his ears. So cranial nerve 8 is also called the auditory nerve, but for old time's sakes and for your professors probably, vestibulocular nerve is a better or older term, but it's also called the auditory nerve, which would help us also remember that cranial nerve 8 is involving the ears. And it's sensory from the inner ears, and it also helps with balance. So it helps us balance, and you could draw it as a seesaw as well. So the lateral 8 or eternity sign as a balancer, so that kind of helps. Cool, that's cranial nerve 8. Now cranial nerve 9. Let me see, do I have a memorization for that one? Cranial nerve 9, I think is straight blunt memorization, but it is what it is. So that one is gonna be tougher. You just gotta remember it. That's like 4, it just kind of sucks. So glossopharyngeal nerve. I guess the pharyngeal will help you because it's the motor to the pharyngeal muscle, but all in all, it is what it is. So motor to the pharyngeal muscle, and it is a sensory from your tongue, your pharynx, and your tonsils. And cranial nerve 9. I feel like that's one of the harder ones to remember. Glossopharyngeal nerve, cranial nerve 9. It's kind of random. Now cranial nerve 10, it's probably the most important of the bunch to remember, and it's an X. We're going to use the X to help us figure out what it does and where it's at. And the name of it also is going to help us figure out what it does. So you draw out that Roman numeral of 10. And then I'm going to draw my best version of a heart because I'm a terrible artist. But there's your big ugly heart. So yeah, so you draw out a heart. That shows us kind of what it's going to do, the function of it. And you're going to leave the bottom section alone. So you're not going to touch the bottom section, and I'll tell you why in a minute. So that helps us see, and we're going to have vagus nerve. So the vagus, the V, can also turn into a heart. So a little smaller heart. There you go. So that vagus nerve. So they're both involving the heart. And this is the most important. Why? Well, because it's the motor nerve to our heart. But not just the heart. We have the bottom end of the Roman numeral of 10. And that's also going to be for our lungs. What's below the heart is the lungs and the GI tract. So 2 important things, or 3 important things, all need to work. And these are the motor functions. So the heart, the lungs, and the GI tract. Cranial nerve 10. And you can go and fill it out if you want. So, cool. So that's cranial 10. Cranial nerve 11 is also going to kind of suck because I don't have one for cranial nerve 11. So let's move on. Let's go. Cool. Cranial nerve 11. This is going to be your spinal accessory nerve. I don't know if you remember from gross anatomy, but it's the big triangle on your back. It's the trapezius muscle, so it's going to be the motor nerve to the trapezius muscle. And that's these guys in the back. They're your big triangular muscles, your traps. and it's located on both sides of the brain. That's just the location. It's just minor extra detail, but it is what it is. So now let's move on to cranial nerve 12. Cranial nerve 12. I didn't think of a way to memorize this either, but until now, it just came to me that hypoglossal can also be spelled out using the letters hypoglossal nerve, and that's going to be 12 letters total for hypoglossal nerve if you counted it out. HYPOGLOSSALN would be 12 letters. So it's located on the top of the brain, and it's motor. It's a motor unit or nerve for the tongue muscle, so it allows us to move our tongue. Cool. So yeah, going through it, it's pretty easy, not too bad. But if you guys liked the video, thank you for watching, and I appreciate it. And yeah, draw it out as much as you can. I think that is the most effective way to learn. So cool.